So here we have our freshly skinned bird. This is the skin here. Right now it's kind of inverted inside out. These are the wing bones. Got the leg bones kind of sticking out here. You can see the feathers kind of coming out. And then we've got the body here. Now I'm preparing the skin for making a study skin. So in that case, the skull is going to remain with the rest of the skin. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of anatomy before I cut the skull off the rest of the body and we go ahead and dissect the body. So just to give you a quick orientation on the body. Hopefully you guys can see this. The sun's come out, so it's a bit more glare. But this is the breast of the bird. You can just see the keel bone right here. These are the flight muscles. This is, the shoulder and the wing bone that I cut. Obviously the neck and then the head. If we look at the head a little more closely, you can see the eye in there. Some muscles and tissues right above the eye. I don't know how focused this is on the screen right now, but you can see there's this kind of spongy material above the eye. That's actually the salt glands that remove salts from the blood. So this is a seabird, so it drinks salt water. And then if we look underneath, we can see the mandibles here and the trachea coming out there. This will also be hard to see once we start cutting, so I just wanted to hopefully show you. But right in here, so this is called the furcula. This is the kind of the chest bone here that acts like a spring during flight. But in between, you can see this thin membrane. Right now it's kind of deflated, but this is actually part of the avian air sac system. So this is one of the larger air sacs. If I pull on the tissue there, you can just kind of see it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the head, then or the skull, and then we're going to dissect the body and look at some of the internal organs. So for the head, this is going to keep the head shape in the study skin that I'm making. Basically, I'm going to remove the eyes. We'll take a look at how large the eyes are. I'll then cut basically the back of the skull and pull out what's inside. So as I'm pulling the eyes, again, this might be hard for you to see, but the optic nerve is here in the back along with some musculature that allows for the eye to be moved. And I'm just trying to get a hold of it so I can pull out the eye. And here we see a typical bird eye. This, so you can see it relative to the background. They have fairly large eyes for the size of their head. They also have kind of a unique thing. I guess it's not unique. Reptiles have this, mammals don't. But there's actually a ring of bone around the eye. It's called the sclerotic ring here, that actually makes the eye quite rigid. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the other eye. Okay, now we've got the empty eye cavities here. So if you look at the skull, right, we tend to think, skull is full of brains. Birds are intelligent, but in terms of body size, the brain is in this part of the skull right here. You can see that most of the space here, what we think of as their head, is actually devoted to the eyes. So a significant proportion of their body is devoted to those very large eyes. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is remove the tongue here. So basically I'm kind of pulling up the tongue. There's a lot of connective tissue here. Normally when I'm not doing this for an anatomy lesson, I just tear through all that connective tissue, but I like to try to keep the tongue intact to give you a look at the bird tongue. So basically I'm slicing through the connective tissue here that connects the tongue to the mandible. And now I've got the tongue out. So again, birds have very unique tongues. I don't know if you can see this, but they have these little flaps that actually help them bring food down their throat. On some birds, this is really long and well developed. Thrushes, for example, have a big fork here, but basically they get a little pocket under that flap that allows them to pull food down their throat. And so now you can see this is basically the alimentary canal, the beginning of the alimentary canal. So food would be going down into that tube down there. Now, if you look right below the alimentary canal, you can kind of see this hose-like structure. It's got kind of these ribs on there, these ridges. That's actually the larynx. So, the trachea. So this is where air goes down into the lungs. And then this flap here that just looks like kind of loose tissue right now, that's actually the throat where food would go down. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Cut this down a little bit. I'm now going to cut through the skull, because basically we just want the outer part of the skull left with the skin. So kind of all the inside parts we're gonna get rid of. Okay, so I've opened up the skull. I wasn't very careful to protect the brain because for our purposes I need to keep the skull kind of smooth on top. But inside you can see the brain. Birds have very well-developed brains, much like humans. Unfortunately, when they're frozen, it tends to degrade, so you're not going to see much other than kind of pink ooze, but that's actually the brain material there. This bird was previously frozen, so it's pretty well broken down. There's not a lot of features on the brain to see right now. And mostly I just want to clean that out. Okay, so now we're looking at the body. Hold it sideways at first. So just to orient you, here is the kind of leg bone I cut. So this is the hip here. You can just make out the ribs right here. Here's, the shoulder and the arm. This is its pectoralis, so this is its breast muscle. And we'll be looking at kind of the layers of breast muscle in just a minute. This just exposed is the keel, so this is the breastbone. Like I showed you earlier, here is the furcula. So this is that kind of wishbone. And then you can just see the membrane of the air sac in there. So if I pull that out, that's the air sac membrane. And then, of course, the neck with the trachea quite visible there. If we look on the back, we can see, this is where the spine is. They have a lot of fusion, so most of their thoracic spine is really not inflexible. So that's right here, kind of in the chest area. Their hip is also very tightly fused, so not a lot of flexure there. You can see it can move kind of between those two areas. And then, of course, a lot of flexion in the neck vertebrae. So if they need to turn around and look, they turn their neck rather than the rest of their body. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is we'll cut into the breast, look at the breast muscles a little bit. We'll then open up the body cavity and look at the internal organs. So just to start with, again, these breast muscles, there's two layers. The outer layer, which pulls for the downstroke, tends to be the slightly bigger part of the muscle. Directly underneath is the supracorticoidal muscle. That actually wraps around the shoulder and pulls up. So during the flapping motion, the upper muscle in the breast pulls down, the lower breast in the muscle pulls back up. So we're going to try to expose those muscles here so you can see the different layers. So I'm going to start by just cutting right along, in this case, the keel here. So this is where the muscles attach right to the breastplate. And both of those muscles attach quite firmly to this keel. Okay, so as I peel this muscle up, I don't know how well you'll be able to see this on screen, but there's basically two layers of muscle. So here, the larger muscle, this is the muscle that pulls the wing down. Underneath, this is the muscle that pulls the wing back up. So they're separated by this kind of loose tissue here that allows them to slide past one another. Now on this bird, this muscle looks very red. That's because these are aerobic flyers. If you're used to, if you eat chicken, for example, the breast meat tends to be very white. That's because they are not aerobic flyers. They don't use that muscle extensively. So in this case, they have white muscle tissue, which can produce a lot of power quickly, but tires out very quick as it's not functioning aerobically. So again, upper muscle layer pulls the wing down, lower muscle layer pulls the wing up. For those of you who do cook with chicken, you guys are probably familiar with this. The breast muscle and then the tender underneath is actually that muscle that pulls the wing back up. Cool. Now under that, we've got the breastplate. So let me just separate this a little more. So in this case, I'm down to bone here. So this is the breastplate here, and then this is the keel on the breastplate where those flight muscles attach. Right at the edge here, as I cut through this muscle a little farther, we start getting to the ribs. And later when we show the skeleton a little more clearly, you'll see that bird ribs are quite different than ours. Get rid of this connective tissue and maybe we'll be able to see it. Okay, so now I'm exposing the ribs. And the ribs on a bird are actually jointed. So again, I don't know how well this shows on the camera, but right here there's a bend in the ribs, and those actually flex. And when birds breathe, they're not breathing like we do. They don't have like a blind sac lung that they're filling and emptying. Instead, they have a one-way lung with a number of air sacs that are pushing air through the lungs. So that'll be covered a lot more in lecture. But basically, as they're ventilating, right, they have to pump that air. They do that by moving their breastplate forward and back relative to their body. So I don't know if you can see this movement, but this is, kind of an exaggerated version of what a bird would be doing while it's breathing. And so as the breastplate basically moves up and down, that's pumping, that's what pumps air through the air sacs, and these hinges on the ribs allow that movement to happen. Now with birds, maintaining center of gravity is very important, so you'll also see that most of the weight is really kind of centered here underneath the breast muscle. So the breast muscles have a lot of weight, and then all the organs are kind of in this compartment here, right? They taper down very quickly as we move back. That again lets these birds maintain their center of balance. Kind of an aside, as I've been pumping the lungs, I don't know, again, how well you can see this. See if I can turn this into the light. But you can kind of see the air sac there inflating and deflating there in the chest. So you can see when I pump that, that's pushing air into that air sac. Okay, so now that we've kind of looked at that structure there, I'm going to cut into the body. What I'm going to do is I'm basically going to cut through these ribs here and do the same on the other side and lift the breastplate out of the way so then we can examine the internal organs. So now I've kind of opened up the body cavity. Kind of the first things that really stand out is here we've got the liver. So this is the major lobes of the liver here. So they're going to be kind of ventrally located within the body cavity. Can move those aside. We can see the intestines down here. And then this is the heart here. So they have very well-developed muscular hearts. They've got, four-chambered hearts, just like mammals do, with kind of flow to the body as well as through the lungs for oxygenation. The lungs themselves are usually right below the heart. So I don't know if you can see this tissue right here. These are the lungs. Bird lungs, remember, are not expanding, contracting like human lungs. Instead, these are going to be kind of one-way passages through which air is forced. So you can see, well, maybe you can't see, but strong vasculature here moving blood into the lungs. So there's some lung tissue that I'm kind of pulling out there. If I kind of pull this connective tissue that kind of suspends all the organs in place here, we can start to pull some out. Down here, these are probably the kidneys near the bottom. And this is getting kind of soupy and juicy down here. I'm not sure how much else we'll get to see down here. But a lot of the accessory digestive organs are kind of, in this case, anterior to the digestive system. And then somewhere down in here, this is going to be very hard to see in this bird, are the gonads as well. So here are the intestines. They're all coiled up. Let's see if I can loosen some of this. So here are the intestines here. Unfortunately, we've got some decomposition. I can see kind of the gases in here. So this is going to get fairly stinky for me. So I'm not going to open up the digestive system. Okay. The stomach would be up in this region here. And in birds that have a crop, the crop would be up here along the chest for the digestive system. Okay. Right below the heart, see if I can move the heart out of the way so you guys can see this. We've got this fork in the trachea. So this is leading to the two anterior air sacs that then push air into the lungs. So I'm kind of holding it up there. I don't know how well you can see, but there's a fork in the trachea. And that's pushing into these anterior air sacs, which then are two of the primary air sacs that push air through the bird. And right above that, this is probably the top of the stomach. So you can see kind of the stomach up there. All right, so liver, very large heart. You can see that is a large part of it. Then the intestines, and of course some of the accessory organs down here. Now that I look at this, this may be the ovary. This might have been a female. I have to dig in here a little more closely to see. Excellent. So not the prettiest sight, but still pretty interesting to see the different parts, the different organs inside the body. Now looking at a couple other things here. Again, if we look at the back, I've cut off the pygostyle that remains with the skin, but just under the skin above the pygostyle, kind of in this position, this is where the preen glands would be, so the orpigeal glands. And yeah. Okay, so we finished the dissection of the fulmar, the seabird. I didn't record the dissection of the orange-crowned warbler, but I did want you to see kind of what the anatomy of a small passerine would look like, and kind of what the organs look like in a fresher bird. So I do have some still images from a passerine dissection. So quickly, I just wanted to kind of go through those and kind of go over some of the major organs again. So the pictures you're looking at now are of the chest, the exposed chest of a small passerine. On the left, that's kind of the intact chest where the skin, we've cut through the skin and peel that back. And you can start to see some interesting structures here, including the bright yellow stuff there are actually fat deposits. You can see, so to orient you in this picture, the top of the picture would be kind of the neck towards the head, the bottom of the picture would be down towards the tail. So that fat deposit is right, kind of in the chest. And birds, they peck on a lot of fat, especially, when they're getting ready to breed, especially when they're preparing to migrate, but they've got to keep all that weight again central in their body, so a lot of the fat goes right on their chest and then sometimes along their back. The other thing we can start to see is some little hints at the skeletal structure there. So right there you're seeing that little white line there is one edge of the furcula, and then where the furcula come together, you can see that white line down the center. That's the tip of the keel on the sternum. And then, of course, all the pink stuff are their breast muscles. And what you're looking at there, that's the pectoralis, right? That's that large muscle that powers the downstroke of the wing. Now, the picture on the right is a photo after we've sliced through the breast muscle there. So you're looking at the internal structure of the breast muscle. So again, the pectoralis muscle is still visible there. And then kind of right below that, you can see the supracoracoideus muscle there as well. So you can see that thin white line that separates the two. But again, those are the main flight muscles. These pictures now show after the breast muscle and the sternum have been removed. So now we're seeing the organs in the body cavity. So the sternum and the ribs are gone. On the left, we're looking kind of top down on the ventral side of the bird. And again, we can see the liver, so the big yellow kind of fleshy bits there. There's two lobes of the liver, one on the left, one on the right. We can also see the heart there. So again, very clear, large muscular heart. Birds tend to have very large muscles or very large hearts relative to the size of their body. So you can see that there. We can also see bits of the digestive system now. So right below kind of the lobe on what would be the bird's left liver lobe, we see the gizzard. So the gizzard is basically one part of the stomach. It's the major part of the stomach in birds, and particularly in birds that are seed eaters or that have food that needs to get ground up. The gizzard tends to be really large and muscular. So remember, birds don't chew. They say weight in the bill, so they don't have the teeth and kind of grinding motion that mammals use to break apart food. Rather, they have a system where they'll consume the food. It'll go into kind of a loose pouch in the chest called a crop, where the food is kind of softened. And then it moves into the gizzard, where this muscular action actually grinds up. It basically does the chewing for the bird. So again, that's in there along with the gastric juices. So the gizzard is basically the major part of the stomach on this bird. And right kind of emanating from the gizzard and curving around underneath it, we also see the intestines there. And what you're looking at there is kind of, one of the top loops of the small intestine. Now in the picture on the right, we're now looking kind of at a lateral view. And again, we see the heart, the liver, and the gizzard all present here as well. And then importantly, you see kind of this pink spongy stuff kind of under the heart. That is the lung. So again, the lungs are not sacs that inflate and deflate like they are in mammals. Rather, they'd have the air sacs pushing air through that lung structure. So you can kind of see the fine structure within the lung. That's all the vascularization and kind of the air passages that allow for gas exchange. Now, if we kind of probe a little deeper, the picture on the left again shows kind of the liver and the heart kind of moved out to show the digestive system in place. So again, we've got liver and heart there. And again, we have the gizzard and the intestine visible, but now you can start to see the loops of the intestine. If we remove the heart and the liver and pull out the intestine, that's when we get the picture on the right. So again, the gizzard and the small intestine are still visible there. You can see how long the small intestine is. You know, that's all packed up and curled around. And then you can just get a peek there at the large intestine underneath. Despite their names, the small intestine is far longer than the large intestine, but the large intestine there is where they're basically going to be kind of collecting their refuse, right? The small intestine is where most of the nutrient exchange takes place. Then if we move the digestive system out of the way, we can start to see some of the smaller organs that are below that. So now, again, we're looking more posterior in the bird, right, towards its back as we kind of dig down from the ventral side. And probably the main feature you can see here is the kidney. So you can see that structure there. Those are the kidneys. The gonads, the sexual organs, are usually located right above the kidneys. So kind of that lobe there is probably one of the testes. Looks like this is probably a male, I think. I'm not the best at sexing them, but I think that's a testy there. And then kind of the pictures to the right are showing bisections of the heart and the gizzard, so you can see how thick and muscular they are. Again, birds have a large four-chambered heart that works very similarly to our hearts, right, and to mammal hearts. And then below that, we see the gizzard, and you can see the thick lining there. That's very muscular. They're using that to grind up food. And again, birds that eat particularly tough foods like seeds, they'll often swallow little stones or sand to help grind things up in the gizzard with this muscular action. And they do that instead of chewing.